Rahila sat by the window, phone pressed to her ear, tears rolling down her cheeks. "When will you come back, Ejaz?" she asked in a trembling voice. It had been 3 long years since her husband had traveled abroad for work. Every day felt like a test of her endurance. On the other end, Ejaz's tone was sharp. "I went there for you, Rahila. You want dollars or not, I'm trying to build us a life. I want us to own a house in an elite neighborhood. Don't you want a luxurious life?" She wiped her tears. "But we already have a house." "Yes, it's small, but it's ours," she said softly. That only angered Ejaz more. "2 rooms. That's all we have. What will happen when we have children? We'll suffocate in there. I can't keep flying back and forth. I've signed a 5-year contract. I might even extend it to 10. This is my only shot, Rahila. You know how hard life is in Pakistan. Without money, we are nothing." Rahila tried to reason with him, her voice breaking. "Then take me with you. It's only been 3 months since our wedding, and you left me. I miss you. I can't live without you." Her voice trembled with suppressed pain. "God's sake, Rahila. I call you every day. We video chat all the time. What else do you want from me?" he snapped. But Rahila couldn't put her heart into words. Could a pixelated face and a few exchanged sentences really substitute for the touch of a husband? Could virtual affection replace the real presence of a partner? She felt like a prisoner of loneliness while her husband justified everything with necessity. She remembered how men abroad often sought other women under the excuse of survival. They painted themselves innocent by claiming, "I couldn't live without a woman, so I had no choice." But was this need only exclusive to men? Did women not have desires too? Was her longing any less valid than his? Each night she turned in bed, haunted by memories of his presence. She would imagine him walking in the door, holding her tight, whispering the words she had been aching to hear. But reality was cruel. He was 1,000 miles away, and his words, instead of soothing her, only inflamed her loneliness. She began to wonder if there was an end to this. Was this marriage destined to survive on video calls and dreams? Was this the life she had envisioned when she married the man she had loved for years? She stared at the dark screen as the call ended, her tears blurring the reflection of her own face. In that moment, Rahila realized something was breaking inside her, not her love, but her patience. After the call ended, Rahila lay motionless in bed, her pillow soaked with tears. She stared at the ceiling, consumed by an emptiness she couldn't explain. The silence of the night pressed down on her, echoing the silence growing between her and Ejaz. He had once been the man who whispered love in every sentence, who made her laugh with silly jokes. Now, every conversation revolved around salaries, savings, and survival. As the days passed, Rahila found herself replaying their memories on a loop, their wedding night, the promises, the excitement of starting a life together. Those early days were filled with love and unfiltered emotion. Neither of them had eyes for anyone else. She had thought his love would only grow stronger with time. Instead, his tone had changed, his warmth replaced with cold calculations. Ejaz's biggest concern became his financial goals: buying a house in a posh area, saving enough to launch a business, securing a life of comfort. But Rahila's heart had simpler dreams: a shared breakfast, a walk together, his hand in hers as they watched the world go by. She didn't want gold or grandeur. She only wanted her husband. He used to say things like, "This opportunity won't come again," and "Be patient, it's just 5 years." But for her, 5 years felt like a life sentence. Each day was a struggle. She longed for his voice, his embrace, his laughter in their home. Her mind was clouded by questions. Would their love survive this long distance? Would he still feel the same for her when he returned? She remembered how, before marriage, they had been inseparable. They were cousins, engaged for 3 years, deeply in love. She had crossed many emotional boundaries during that time, thinking love permitted it, thinking their connection justified it all. They used to talk on the phone for hours, exchange romantic messages, and even fulfill each other's desires through video calls. She had trusted him completely, believing that he was hers forever. When he finally got a low-paying job, her father hesitated, but Rahela couldn't wait any longer. She pleaded with her mother, stood firm, and got married. Just when she thought they could finally build a life together, Ejaz dropped another bomb, a job offer from Italy with a 5-year contract. "I'll earn millions. We'll be rich. We'll live like kings," he had said with shining eyes. He had painted pictures of a future full of luxury and pride, but none of those dreams included her presence by his side. And now the nights were colder, the house emptier, and her heart lonelier than ever before. The love she once shared with Ejaz felt like a distant dream, something she could no longer touch or feel. As she stood at the window watching the streetlights flicker, she whispered to herself, "Was love supposed to hurt this much?" The weeks passed, and Rahela continued to live in a state of emotional starvation. Her phone became both her lifeline and her curse. Every ring brought hope. Maybe Ejaz had remembered her today. Maybe he would say something tender. But most calls were filled with complaints about work, exhaustion, and financial burdens. Rarely did he ask how she was truly feeling. It was as if her emotional existence had faded from his world, replaced by spreadsheets and deadlines. At night, Rahela's pillow became her confidant. She would close her eyes and pretend he was beside her. She would whisper imagined conversations, smile through tears, and fall asleep clutching the phone. Her body ached not just from absence, but from the weight of unmet affection. What a cruel irony, she thought. The man she loved more than anything was alive, yet so far, so unreachable, as though he belonged to another universe. In her loneliness, she began to compare herself to other women. Her friends would often share stories of how their husbands took them out to dinner, brought home small gifts, or simply hugged them tightly after a tiring day. Rahela had none of that. Even when Ejaz had been around, his love had begun to fade just weeks into their marriage. While she remained passionately devoted, he became distant, speaking more of money than of love. "I want to give you the world," he had said once, frustrated. "But right now I can't even afford a dinner in a good restaurant," she had laughed then, saying, "We'll survive on lentils and love." But he didn't laugh back. Instead, he looked down in shame, repeating how embarrassed he felt even putting fuel in the motorbike or buying ice cream for her. His pride, Rahela realized, was both his strength and his flaw. He couldn't accept a modest life, not even if it meant sacrificing their closeness. And now, even though she asked for nothing, he saw her as a future burden. "What about when we have kids?" he had argued once. Will we feed them water when we can't afford milk?" She knew he wasn't entirely wrong. The world wasn't easy for people like them, the ones without powerful contacts or inherited wealth. But wasn't love supposed to be a comfort, not another source of stress? Her own household was beginning to change. Her brothers had married and become occupied with their own lives. Her father, once a pillar of support, had passed away. Slowly, she began to feel like a guest in her own home. Her needs were small, just a call, a kind word, a promise of return. But even those were vanishing. Every night, she stared at the ceiling fans spinning above her, wishing it would reverse time, bring Ejaz back, make things whole again. But reality didn't bend to wishes. And Rahela? She was beginning to wonder how much longer she could carry the weight of this love alone. One ordinary afternoon, Rahela gathered the courage to speak again with Ejaz. Her voice was soft but firm, trembling under the weight of buried pain. "Ejaz, when will you come back?" she asked. "It's been years. I need you. Don't I have a right over you as your wife?" She thought this time he would understand, that he'd hear the desperation in her voice, that he'd at least say something kind. But instead, his response was cold and cutting. "I'll come back when I want to," he said bitterly. "I won't ruin my future for a woman who's acting insane." Then, click, the line went dead. Rahela stared at the blank screen, her hand frozen. She hadn't expected affection, but she hadn't expected cruelty either. It was as if their years of love, sacrifice, and promises had all vanished in a single moment. That one sentence hit her harder than any silence ever had. For the next 7 days, she didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She didn't even cry much. She just sat there, lifeless, waiting for a message, a missed call, anything from Ejaz. But there was nothing. The house began to feel like a grave, quiet, cold, and heavy with loneliness. Her clothes hung untouched in the cupboard. Her phone lay silent on the nightstand. Her hair became tangled and her face pale. Life was happening around her, but she wasn't a part of it anymore. Then, on the 8th day, her closest friend Sadra arrived unexpectedly. When Sadra saw Rahila in that broken state, she gasped. Without a word, she helped her up, brushed her hair, and gave her a clean dress. She sat her down and asked gently, "What happened to you, Rahila? Why do you look like a ghost wandering without a soul?" Rahila tried to stay silent, but the pain burst out in sobs. She poured everything out, the fights, the silence, the rejection, and her growing sense of abandonment. Sadra hugged her tightly and cried with her. Then she said something Rahila wasn't prepared for. "Why are you wasting your life over a man who may have already forgotten you?" Men. They go out, they work, they disappear for hours, and we never really know where they are or what they're doing. You're still young, still beautiful. Live your life. Go out, smile again. Rahila looked up at her friend's sincere face. She wanted to believe that Sadra was right, that she deserved happiness, that it was okay to take a breath without guilt. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to be led outside. Just a simple walk. But that small step felt enormous, like escaping a cage she didn't realize she was trapped in. Still, deep in her heart, she missed Ejaz. No matter what he had said, he was her first love, her husband, her hope. Yet now she didn't know if he was even alive, and that uncertainty was its own kind of death. Weeks passed, and although Rahila tried to distract herself, her heart remained unsettled. One night, a strange feeling crept into her chest, a kind of dread she couldn't shake off. She began to see disturbing dreams. In one of them, she saw Ejaz calling out to her from a dark room, but no sound came out of his mouth. She would wake up breathless, clutching her chest, certain something terrible had happened. That unease led her to do something she had avoided all this time. She turned on the international news. While scrolling, her eyes locked onto a headline. Explosion in Italy. Suicide attack destroys company headquarters. Her stomach turned. With shaking hands, she clicked the article and began to read. The article listed the dead, the injured, and the missing. Among the dead, the CEO. The rest, unnamed. Her heart dropped. Unnamed. It had been over 2 weeks since the incident. She hadn't heard from Ejaz in a month. The silence now made cruel sense. Rahila collapsed to the floor, screaming his name. Tears gushed from her eyes as regret hit her like a storm. The last words she had said to him were filled with frustration. She had begged him to come back, and he hadn't. What if that had been their final goodbye? What if the man she had loved so deeply had died thinking she had given up on him? She mourned him like a widow, but there was no body, no funeral, no confirmation, just silence. The days that followed were heavy and confusing. Her brothers, now married and busy with their own lives, didn't offer much comfort. Her home had stopped feeling like home. Her father was no more, and the house felt colder than ever. Rahila moved to a small rental near Sadra's place to find some emotional refuge. But life outside wasn't much easier. Prices had skyrocketed. She had no income. Every necessity felt like a burden. She tried to find work, but jobs for women like her, alone and inexperienced, were few and far between. Her visits to Sadra became her only escape. Sadra would chat about her married life, laughing about her husband's quirks. Rahila would smile politely, but inside she felt hollow. That ache, that need. It was more than emotional now. Her body, too, cried for affection. She hesitated to share these thoughts, but one evening, while they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, she whispered, "Sadra, what do women do when they can't take this loneliness anymore?" Sadra turned toward her with a strange calm and replied, "They survive. Or they find a solution. There are ways, Rahila." That night, the idea Sadra planted would open a door Rahila never imagined she'd approach. A door that led not to healing, but toward temptation, wrapped in justification. She didn't know it yet, but her grief was about to take a sharp, irreversible turn. The evening breeze carried whispers of confusion through Rahila's mind. Sadra's words echoed like a bell. There are ways. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept wondering what her friend had meant. Was there truly a way to ease this loneliness without stepping into sin? The next day, over a quiet cup of tea, Sadra leaned in and said calmly, I wasn't joking yesterday. If you really want to escape this emptiness, physically, emotionally, and financially, there is an option: temporary marriage. Rahila's eyes widened in disbelief. Muta? She asked, almost choking on her tea. Sadra nodded. Yes, it still exists. Some people don't consider it wrong. You get to decide the duration: a week, a month. The man agrees to pay a dowry. There's no burden of lifelong commitment, and no one has to know. Rahila was stunned. But isn't that wrong? Wasn't it abolished centuries ago? Sadra shrugged. There are people who say it's still valid. Religious scholars debate it, and some communities still practice it, secretly, of course. Look, I'm not forcing you, but you're sitting here every day, lost, broken, starving in every way. Think about it. You could earn money and feel like a woman again. Rahila's heart tightened. Part of her was repulsed. Another part was listening. Her friend's words scratched the surface of her pain. How long could she endure like this? Every day she woke up feeling forgotten. Her body ached with longing. Her stomach rumbled with hunger. Her soul craved purpose. Still, she hesitated. That night she prayed, asking God to forgive her thoughts and her weakness. But days turned into weeks. Her financial condition worsened. No jobs came, the house rent was due, her savings were nearly gone, and then, like a shadow whispering in her ear, the thought returned. Just once, just for survival, she met Sadra again. This time she didn't protest. They visited a hidden office run by an older woman, maybe in her 50s, who facilitated such marriages. She welcomed Rahila with a knowing smile. You'll get any man you want, she said. You're beautiful, quiet, modest. You'll get 70,000 rupees for just a month. Rahila sat in silence while Sadra did all the talking. It was like watching someone else arrange her fate. Part of her wanted to scream and run. Another part, and the desperate one, nodded quietly. The contract was prepared. A man had been chosen. She was to marry him that evening. The dowry would be paid after the month ended. Rahila sat in bridal clothes, her heart pounding. Tears welled up in her eyes. This wasn't her. This wasn't who she wanted to be. But maybe it was too late to go back. As she waited for the groom to enter, she told herself, it's just 1 month. Just money. Just survival. Then the door opened, and the man who stepped in made her soul shatter. Rahila's heart slammed against her chest as the door creaked open. She lowered her gaze, still torn between guilt and resignation. The sound of footsteps approached softly, measured, hesitant. She told herself not to look. Just get through this. It was done now, no turning back. But something compelled her. A force stronger than fear. Slowly she lifted her head, her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her was Ajaz. Her Ajaz. Time froze. The air felt pulled from the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke, their eyes locked, wide with disbelief and horror. Rahila felt as though the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Her lips trembled, but no words formed. Ajaz was equally stunned. His body stiffened, his jaw clenched. He looked at her, dressed like a bride, and then at Sadra, who stood frozen beside them. Realization began to settle into his eyes like a storm forming. Rahila leapt up, her voice barely a whisper. Ajaz? He didn't answer, just stared. Sadra stepped forward in a panic. This wasn't planned. We didn't know. But Ajaz raised his hand, signaling her to stop. His eyes were still locked on Rahila's face. She moved toward him slowly, trembling. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice cracking. Weren't you in Italy? He looked dazed. I've been in Pakistan for months, trying to find you. Tears erupted in Rahila's eyes. Her knees weakened, and she collapsed onto the nearest chair. Sadra helped steady her, but Ijaz quickly stepped in, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. Outside in the car, the three sat in stunned silence. Finally, Ejaz began to explain. I tried to contact you for a year and a half. My messages bounced. Your number changed. I even came to your old house. But you had moved. I thought, he paused, struggling to say it. I thought you married someone else. Rahila's voice was hollow. I thought you were dead. I saw the news. The explosion. Your company. I left that company, Ejaz said. Took a job in another firm, hoping to double my salary. It was a mistake. The company collapsed. I lost everything. No salary, no visa, no job. I came back home, broke and ashamed, only to find you gone. Rahila buried her face in her hands. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you try harder? I did, Rahila. I searched for months. And now I come here and you, his voice cracked. You were about to marry someone else. They both sat in silence, shattered, realizing how the universe had brought them back together at the very edge of disaster. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a collision of guilt, fate, misunderstanding, and love, all in one room. And now they had to decide. Was this the end of their story, or a painful new beginning? They sat in the parked car for a long while, the engine off, the air between them dense with unspoken pain. Sadra, still shaken, sat quietly in the back seat, unsure whether to stay or leave. Eventually, she whispered, I'll give you both some space, and quietly stepped out, closing the door behind her. Rahila turned to face Ejaz, her eyes red and swollen. I never imagined, never, that the man I was about to marry tonight would be you. Ejaz looked at her, his eyes carrying the weight of his own storms. And I never thought that the woman I'd find in this place would be the only one I ever loved. Rahila wiped her tears, her voice quivering. I thought you died. I mourned you without a grave. I cried for weeks. I fell apart. And then Sadra, she paused. She convinced me that maybe I deserved to be touched again, to feel alive, that I had the right to move on. Ejaz looked away, his jaw tightened. And you believed that? Rahila nodded slowly. Not at first. But life doesn't just break hearts, Ejaz. It breaks bodies, it breaks spirits. I was starving for food, for love, for meaning. I couldn't find work. I had no one left. And you were gone. Her words didn't need defense. They carried their own truth. Raw, imperfect, but real. Ejaz exhaled deeply. I thought you had forgotten me. That you had remarried. A friend of mine even told me they heard you'd disappeared with another man. I couldn't eat for days. My pride was wounded. I thought everything we had meant nothing. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I left my second job thinking I'd earn more. I ended up with nothing. I lost everything I worked for, all that talk about millions. Dreams I weaved for us. They were dust. I wanted to be the man who gave you everything, but I ended up with nothing. Rahila placed a gentle hand on his. You didn't need to give me everything, Ejaz. I just wanted you. That broke him. His eyes welled up, and for the first time since they reunited, he let the tears fall. Not of shame, not of anger, but of deep, buried love that had survived a misunderstanding, distance, and despair. I was wrong, he whispered. Greed blinded me. I thought if I didn't bring you gold, I wasn't worthy of you. She shook her head. And I was wrong too. I let pain lead me to a place I never wanted to be. But fate did something strange today. They both sat in that moment, their hands locked, realizing that they had both come close to losing everything, including each other. But fate, cruel as it had been, had given them one last chance. And this time, neither of them wanted to let go. They returned to Sadra's home in silence. No one said much. Sadra made tea, quietly placed it in front of them, and then excused herself, knowing this was no longer her story to stand inside. Rahila and Ejaz sat across from each other on the small floor mattress. The room was dimly lit, warm, and quiet, the kind of silence that allowed space for healing. Ejaz broke it first. When I returned to Pakistan, everything had changed. I had no job, no home, and no Rahila. He paused. I was too ashamed to face anyone. I sold the little gold I had left and invested it in a friend's small business. I also gave up the land my father had left me. It was all or nothing. I was desperate. Rahila listened, her heart softening. And did it work out? He nodded. Yes, slowly. We started with nothing, but within months it picked up. Now I have a decent monthly income, a place of my own, and the freedom to choose my own path. No contracts, no foreign lands. I built it all here, so I could take you back into a life we once dreamed of. A tear slipped from Rahila's eye. And all this time, I thought you were dead. He reached for her hand gently, this time with no shame. And I thought I'd lost you forever. I let my ego drive me away. I made you feel like love had to be earned through bank accounts. She clutched his hand tightly, and I let fear push me to a point where I was about to sell pieces of myself just to feel needed. I hated myself for agreeing to that marriage contract. But I had no idea that behind that door, it would be you. Ejaz shook his head. That wasn't a mistake, Rahila. That was a rescue. God brought us both to the edge so we could look down, and then choose to climb back together. A long silence passed, filled only with the warmth of forgiveness. Finally, Ejaz smiled faintly. You know, you look the same. Still the same girl who told me she'd survive on lentils and bread. And you, Rahila replied with a gentle smile, still dreaming of castles and riches. They laughed, a soft, tired laugh, but one full of release. As they sipped their now lukewarm tea, Ejaz said, Let's forget the past. Let's start again. I want to take you home. Not to a palace, not to a big house, but to a place where I will never leave you again. Rahila nodded. For the first time in years, her heart didn't ache with emptiness. It fluttered with something else, hope. Their journey had nearly broken them, but somehow, through pain and mistakes, they found their way back to what mattered most. Not luxury, not appearances, just love. Weeks later, Rahila stood at the threshold of a new home. Not the two-room space of their past, nor the grand mansion Ejaz once dreamed of, but a modest, sunlit house on a quiet street. Its white walls were plain, the furniture simple, but to her it felt like a palace. Because this time, Ejaz was by her side. Not as a dream floating in video calls, but as a man who had returned, humbled and healed. As they unpacked boxes, Rahila found an old photo, one from their engagement days. They looked so young, so blindly in love. She handed it to Ejaz, who smiled and said, We were just kids playing house, weren't we? Rahila laughed. Back then, we thought love meant roses and promises. We had no idea it meant surviving storms, breaking down, and finding each other again in the rubble. They both fell silent. Because it was true. Their love hadn't grown easy. It had grown real. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of orange, Ejaz stood beside Rahila in the courtyard. You know, he said softly, when I was in Italy, I thought money would fix everything. I believed if I came back with pockets full of gold, I could make you proud. Rahila turned to him, her eyes kind. But I was already proud of you. I married you when you had nothing. I loved you when we shared tea instead of feasts. I just wanted you. He took her hands in his. I know that now. And I swear, I'll never let anything take me away from you again. Not greed, not pride, not even dreams. They stayed like that for a while, letting the quiet wind carry away the remains of old pain. Rahila never forgot the night she almost stepped into something irreversible. But that memory, instead of shaming her, became a reminder of how close they both had come to being lost, and how fate, despite everything, had stitched their broken pieces together again. She no longer carried the burden of what ifs, not what if he never came back, not what if he found out, because he had returned, and he had found her, and instead of blame, he brought forgiveness. Instead of punishment, he offered understanding. In the months that followed, their life was far from perfect. There were bills, occasional arguments, and the ups and downs of rebuilding. But they shared those struggles now, in person, hand in hand. They didn't need to chase foreign currencies or empty dreams anymore. What they needed was right there: a shared bed, shared meals, shared laughter, and a quiet kind of love that had survived war zones of distance and disaster. And every night, as Rahila rested her head on Ajaz's shoulder, she whispered a prayer of thanks. Because sometimes love doesn't return with roses, it returns as a miracle disguised in forgiveness.